Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Marcus Boyle had built his life like he built his construction empire, methodically, with careful planning and an unwavering attention to detail. At 45, he commanded respect in both the boardroom and on construction sites across 3 states. His company, Boyle Construction, had grown from a small family business inherited from his father into a multi-million-dollar operation with over 200 employees. The early morning light filtered through the windows of his home office as Marcus reviewed the quarterly reports. His daughter Meredith, 23 and fresh out of college with a business degree, worked the morning shift at a local grocery store while waiting for the right opportunity to join the family business. She had insisted on earning her place rather than accepting a handed position, a decision that filled Marcus with pride. Christy, his wife of 25 years, had been different when they first met. Back then, she was a waitress putting herself through community college, ambitious and driven. Marcus had fallen for her determination as much as her beauty. They'd built their life together, weathering the early struggles of growing a business, celebrating each milestone. But success had changed Christy. As Marcus's wealth grew, so did her appetite for luxury and social status. She transformed into someone who measured worth by designer labels and country club memberships. The woman who once worked double shifts to help fund their first equipment purchase now spent her days at charity luncheons and spa appointments, surrounded by other wealthy wives who viewed life as a competition. Marcus had noticed the changes but attributed them to natural evolution. People grew apart sometimes. Marriages required work. He'd thrown himself deeper into his business, trusting that their foundation was strong enough to weather any storm. That trust was about to be tested. It started with small inconsistencies. Christy's phone face down during dinner. Unexplained afternoon absences. New lingerie that never seemed intended for him. Marcus's instincts, honed by years of managing people and reading situations, began to whisper warnings he didn't want to hear. The construction industry had taught Marcus that problems were easier to fix when caught early. Ignoring structural issues only led to catastrophic failure later. So when his wife began exhibiting behavioral changes that made no sense, Marcus did what he did best. He investigated. He didn't hire a private detective. That felt too impersonal, too removed from the situation. Instead, Marcus used skills he developed over decades of business: patience, observation, and the ability to connect seemingly unrelated information into a complete picture. The first concrete evidence came on a Thursday evening. Christy claimed to be meeting her sister Janet for dinner, but Marcus had seen Janet that afternoon at the hardware store, mentioning she was staying in with her sick daughter. A simple lie, but lies in Marcus's world were like cracks in concrete. They spread if left untreated. Marcus began documenting everything with the same precision he used for project management. Dates, times, locations, contradictions. He installed a tracking app on the family tablet that Christy often used, positioning it as a security measure after a neighbor's house was burglarized. The pattern emerged quickly. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Christy would create elaborate excuses to meet someone at the Grandview Hotel downtown. She'd arrive at 2 p.m. and leave by 4:30 p.m., plenty of time to create an alibi for her afternoon activities. Marcus drove by the hotel one Tuesday, parking where he could observe the entrance. His chest tightened when he saw Christy exit the elevator at 4:25 p.m., but it was the man who emerged 2 minutes later that turned his blood cold. Hugh Reynolds, Marcus's own project manager, a man he'd hired 3 years ago and trusted with million-dollar contracts. Hugh was married to Frances, a pleasant woman Marcus had met at several company gatherings. They had 2 young children. The betrayal cut deeper than Marcus had anticipated. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a violation by someone he'd brought into his professional family, someone who sat his meetings, shook his hand, and called him boss while sleeping with his wife. That night, Marcus sat in his study long after Christy had gone to bed, staring at the construction photos lining his walls. Each image represented a project built from nothing, carefully planned and executed. His marriage was crumbling, but Marcus Boyle had never walked away from a failing structure without understanding exactly why it fell. He would approach this like any other project that had gone wrong, methodically, thoroughly, and with an eye toward permanent solutions. Chapter 2. The Discovery. Marcus spent the next 2 weeks gathering intelligence with the patience of a master craftsman. He'd learned long ago that rushed work led to poor results, and this situation demanded his absolute best effort. The surveillance revealed disturbing details about the affair's duration and brazenness. Hotel records, obtained through a contact who owed Marcus a favor from a construction project, showed Christie and Hugh had been meeting for 8 months. They'd grown comfortable, careless even, often arriving within minutes of each other. But it was the personal intelligence that truly infuriated Marcus. Christie had been telling Hugh about private family matters, Meredith's job struggles, Marcus's business concerns, even intimate details about their marriage. Hugh, meanwhile, was feeding Christie information about Marcus's work schedule, upcoming projects, and business relationships. They weren't just having an affair. They were conspiring together, treating Marcus's life like their personal entertainment. Christie would laugh about Marcus's boring construction stories, while Hugh shared company gossip and inside information that allowed Christie to manipulate conversations with Marcus's associates. The breaking point came when Marcus discovered they'd been meeting at other locations too. Christie's charity events often coincided with Hugh's site inspections at remote project locations. They'd been using Marcus's own business as cover for their affair, likely laughing about his ignorance while surrounded by the fruits of his labor. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Christie, working late at the charity auction planning. "Don't wait up." The timestamp showed 6:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Marcus knew she was 20 minutes away at the Grandview Hotel with Hugh, probably already naked and mocking the husband who provided her lifestyle. That night, Marcus made 2 decisions that would change everything. First, he would not confront them directly. That was what emotional people did, and emotion led to mistakes. Second, he would ensure that when this ended, both Christie and Hugh would understand the true cost of betraying Marcus Boyle. Marcus had built his business on the principle that reputation was everything. A contractor who delivered quality work on time would always have customers. But contractors who cut corners, who betrayed trust, who thought they could take advantage of others, they found themselves blacklisted, unemployable, forgotten. Christie and Hugh had made the mistake of thinking Marcus was just another trusting husband, too focused on work to notice what was happening in his own house. They would learn how wrong they were. The plan began forming in Marcus's mind like a blueprint taking shape. Construction projects succeeded because every element was planned, every contingency considered, every outcome predicted. This would be no different. Marcus opened his laptop and began making notes. Timing would be crucial. The company holiday party was scheduled for the following month, an annual event that all employees attended with their spouses. Christie looked forward to it every year, enjoying the opportunity to socialize with Marcus's business associates and their wives. This year's party would be special indeed. Marcus also began thinking about Hugh's position in the company. As project manager, Hugh had access to sensitive information, client relationships, and operational details. He'd been with Boyle Construction for 3 years, long enough to accumulate knowledge that could be valuable to competitors. But Hugh had also made mistakes, small ones that Marcus had overlooked out of loyalty and trust. Scheduling conflicts that cost overtime, supplier relationships that seemed oddly beneficial to certain vendors. Nothing criminal, but patterns that suggested Hugh might be more interested in personal gain than company success. Marcus pulled Hugh's employment file and began reviewing everything with fresh eyes. What had seemed like simple mistakes now looked different when viewed through the lens of betrayal. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office early and called Meredith. His daughter had been working at Morrison's Grocery for 6 months, gaining real-world experience in customer service and retail management. She'd mentioned wanting to transition into the construction business, but insisted on proving herself first. "Dad, you're calling early. Everything okay? I have a proposition for you," Marcus said. How would you feel about fast-tracking your entry into the family business? Meredith's excitement was audible. Really? I mean, yes, absolutely. I've been hoping you'd consider. Good. I want you to start immediately as assistant project coordinator. You'll work directly with me on client relationships and operational oversight. Dad, that's incredible. But what about Hugh? Isn't he the project manager? Marcus smiled grimly. Hugh's going to be very busy with other responsibilities soon. I need someone I can trust completely to help me with some upcoming changes. After ending the call, Marcus leaned back in his chair and looked out at the construction yard where his trucks were beginning their daily routes. Each vehicle bore the Boyle Construction logo, a symbol of trust, quality, and family legacy. Christy and Hugh had no idea what they'd unleashed. They thought they were playing games with a simple contractor, too busy with work to notice his wife's wandering eye. They were about to discover that Marcus Boyle was many things, but simple wasn't one of them. The foundation for their destruction was already being laid. Chapter 3: The Revelation. The annual Boyle Construction Holiday Party was held at the Riverside Country Club, the same venue where Marcus and Christy had celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on him as he watched his wife prepare for an evening she thought would be another social triumph. Christy had spent hours getting ready, choosing a designer dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. She'd had her hair done that afternoon at the most expensive salon in town, her nails perfectly manicured, her makeup applied with professional precision. "You look beautiful," Marcus told her as they prepared to leave, and he meant it. Christy was still stunning at 43, still capable of turning heads when she entered a room. That beauty had been one of the first things that attracted him to her. Now, it was just another tool she used to manipulate and deceive. "Thank you, honey," Christy replied, kissing his cheek carefully to avoid smudging her lipstick. "I'm excited to see everyone tonight. Is Hugh bringing Francis?" The casual mention of Hugh's name sent a familiar surge of anger through Marcus, but his expression remained pleasant. Of course, all the senior staff will be there with their spouses. During the drive to the country club, Christy chattered about the evening ahead, mentioning several people she hoped to see. She didn't mention Hugh directly again, but Marcus caught her checking her appearance in the visor mirror more frequently than usual. The party was already in full swing when they arrived. The country club's main ballroom was decorated with tasteful holiday arrangements, and the bar was doing steady business among Marcus's employees and their families. Everyone was dressed in their finest, treating the evening as the special occasion it was meant to be. Marcus moved through the crowd with practiced ease, playing the role of gracious host and successful businessman. He introduced Christy to new employees, chatted with longtime workers about their families, and accepted congratulations on another successful year for Boyle Construction. Meredith arrived fashionably late, having insisted on driving herself rather than coming with her parents. Marcus watched his daughter enter the ballroom with quiet pride. She'd inherited Christy's beauty, but combined it with Marcus's confidence and intelligence. At 23, she carried herself with the poise of someone much older. "Everyone, meet our new assistant project coordinator," Marcus announced loudly enough for nearby groups to hear. "My daughter Meredith is joining the family business." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Marcus's employees had watched Meredith grow up, had seen her working at the grocery store, and respected her decision to earn her way into the company rather than simply accepting a nepotism position. Hugh Reynolds approached with Francis, both offering congratulations to Meredith. Hugh's smile seemed forced, and Marcus noticed the way his project manager's eyes kept darting between Meredith and Christy. "Congratulations, Meredith," Hugh said. "I look forward to working with you." "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds," Meredith replied professionally. "Dad's told me great things about your project management skills." Marcus watched the interaction carefully. He was clearly uncomfortable with Meredith's new role, probably wondering how it would affect his own position. Good. Uncertainty was exactly what Marcus wanted Hugh to feel. The evening progressed smoothly until Kevin Wiley, the senior foreman who'd been with Marcus for 15 years, had too much to drink and decided to share his opinions about Meredith's qualifications. "Your daughter is just a cashier," Kevin said loudly enough for several nearby groups to hear. Why bring her to the company party as if she belongs here? The comment drew uncomfortable laughter from some of the younger employees, including Hugh, who seemed relieved to have someone else expressing doubts about Meredith's rapid promotion. Even Christy, standing nearby with her wine glass, smiled and nodded approvingly at Kevin's bluntness. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He'd expected some resistance to Meredith's quick advancement, but not public humiliation, and definitely not from his own wife. "She's an embarrassment to your career," Kevin continued, emboldened by the laughter. "You're supposed to hire based on merit, not family connections." Marcus was about to respond when he saw Wes Ferguson, CEO of Ferguson Development and Marcus's biggest client, making his way through the crowd toward their group. Wes was a man Marcus deeply respected, a third-generation businessman who'd built his company into one of the region's most successful development firms. "Marcus," Wes called out, his voice carrying across the room. "I need to borrow you and your daughter for a moment." The crowd quieted as Wes approached. He was well known in the local business community, and his presence at Marcus's company party was both an honor and a surprise. Wes walked directly to Meredith and extended his hand. "Everyone, meet our new junior partner," he announced clearly. "Meredith Boyle has just accepted a position with Ferguson Development as liaison for our construction partnerships." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus felt his own surprise mix with pride as he looked at his daughter, who was handling the announcement with remarkable composure. "I'll be working closely with both Ferguson Development and Boyle Construction," Meredith explained to the stunned crowd. "It's an exciting opportunity to bridge the gap between development and construction management." Marcus quickly understood what had happened. Wes had been recruiting Meredith independently, probably for months. Her position at the grocery store had been temporary. She'd been waiting for the right opportunity, not settling for less. The implications hit Kevin Wiley first. His face went white as he realized he'd just publicly insulted the daughter of his boss, who was also the new business partner of their biggest client. Christy's wine glass trembled in her hand as she processed what had just happened. The daughter she'd been laughing about moments earlier was now in a position that could significantly impact Marcus's business relationships. Hugh Reynolds looked like he might be sick. As project manager, he would be working directly with Meredith in her new role. The woman whose mother he was sleeping with would now have professional oversight of his work. "Sir, I didn't know she was," Kevin stammered, looking desperately at Marcus for some sign of forgiveness. Marcus let the moment stretch, allowing everyone to fully absorb the reversal of fortune they'd just witnessed. His daughter, who they'd been mocking as just a cashier, was now in a position of real power within their professional ecosystem. "Didn't know she was what, Kevin?" Marcus asked quietly. "Qualified, educated, capable of earning opportunities based on her own merit." The party continued around them, but Marcus could feel the shift in atmosphere. People were looking at his family with new eyes, reassessing their assumptions about Meredith and, by extension, about Marcus himself. As the evening wound down, Marcus watched Christy and Hugh from across the room. They were standing with their respective spouses, maintaining the pretense of propriety, but Marcus could see the tension between them. Tonight had complicated their neat little arrangement significantly. Meredith's new position would require her to work closely with Hugh on multiple projects. Christy's social standing among the wives had just been elevated considerably. Meredith was no longer the unemployed daughter, but a young professional with real influence. The affair that had seemed like a private game between Christy and Hugh now had professional implications neither had anticipated. Marcus approached his daughter as the party was ending. "Congratulations," he said sincerely. "When did Wes make the offer?" 3 weeks ago, Meredith replied. "I wanted to tell you, but he asked me to keep it quiet until tonight." He said surprise announcements carry more impact. Marcus smiled genuinely for the first time all evening. His daughter was already thinking like a businesswoman, understanding the value of timing and presentation. "You're going to do excellent work," he told her. "I'm proud of you." As they prepared to leave, Marcus caught Hugh's eye across the room. His project manager was helping Frances with her coat, but his attention was clearly elsewhere. Hugh looked worried, uncertain about how Meredith's new role would affect his own position. You should be worried, Marcus thought. Everything was about to change, and Hugh Reynolds had no idea how dramatically his comfortable little world was about to be disrupted. The foundation was set. Now Marcus could begin building toward his ultimate goal, complete and total justice for the betrayal he'd suffered. Chapter 4. The Manipulation. Marcus arrived at the office the following Monday with a plan that would have impressed his most demanding clients. Like any complex construction project, success would depend on precise timing, careful coordination, and the ability to anticipate every possible complication. Meredith was already at her new desk when Marcus walked in, reviewing project files with the intensity he recognized as a family trait. Her transition from grocery store cashier to construction liaison was seamless. She'd clearly been preparing for this opportunity longer than anyone realized. "Morning, Dad," she said, looking up from a stack of client contracts. "I've been reviewing the Ferguson projects. There are some interesting patterns in the scheduling and cost overruns." Marcus sat down across from her desk. "What kind of patterns?" "Several projects managed by Hugh have experienced similar delays, always for different reasons, but the additional costs seem to benefit the same group of subcontractors." Meredith pointed to specific line items she'd highlighted. "It could be coincidence, but the numbers suggest otherwise." This was exactly what Marcus had hoped for. Meredith's fresh perspective and business education were revealing issues that he'd been too trusting to see clearly. Hugh's betrayal wasn't limited to personal relationships. It extended to professional conduct as well. "I want you to dig deeper into those patterns," Marcus told her. "But quietly. Don't discuss this with anyone else yet." "Of course. What about Hugh? Should I coordinate with him on the current projects?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Yes, but document everything. Every conversation, every decision, every recommendation he makes. I have a feeling that documentation will become very important." The next phase of Marcus's plan involved reshaping the professional dynamics at Boyle Construction. Hugh's position as project manager had given him significant autonomy, but that was about to change. With Meredith serving as liaison between Ferguson Development and Boyle Construction, Hugh would find himself under much closer scrutiny. Marcus called a meeting for Tuesday morning. The same day, Hugh usually met Christy at the hotel. The timing was deliberate. "I'm implementing new oversight procedures," Marcus announced to his senior staff. "All project decisions above $5,000 will require approval from both project management and our development liaison." Hugh shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "That seems like it could slow down operations significantly." "Efficiency is important," Marcus agreed, "but accuracy is more important. We've had some cost overruns that need to be addressed." Meredith spoke up from her seat at the conference table. "Ferguson Development has expressed concerns about budget predictability. They need more detailed reporting on where delays are occurring and why." Marcus watched Hugh's reaction carefully. His project manager was clearly calculating how these new procedures would affect his schedule and his ability to maintain the patterns Meredith had identified. "I'll need to reschedule some meetings to accommodate the additional oversight," Hugh said carefully. "That's fine," Marcus replied. "We all need to adjust our schedules to serve our clients better." Hugh's face tightened almost imperceptibly. Marcus knew his project manager was thinking about his Tuesday afternoon arrangements with Christy. The new oversight requirements would make it much more difficult for Hugh to disappear for 2-hour periods without explanation. After the meeting, Marcus returned to his office and made a call to his contact at the Grandview Hotel. "I need you to do me another favor," he said. "Starting today, I want to know every time room 237 is booked and by whom." That evening, Marcus casually mentioned to Christy that he'd be working late several nights that week. "New oversight procedures," he explained. "Meredith's role with Ferguson is requiring more detailed reporting." Christy's response was carefully neutral. "That's nice, dear. I might have some evening plans myself. Janet and I are organizing a charity event." Marcus nodded sympathetically. "I hope the charity work goes well. What's the cause this time?" "Children's education," Christy replied without missing a beat. "Very important work." Marcus filed away another lie for his growing collection. Christy's sister Janet volunteered at the animal shelter, not children's charities. More importantly, Marcus had seen Janet that afternoon at the hardware store, and she'd mentioned planning a quiet week at home. The next day, Meredith knocked on Marcus's office door with a concerned expression. "Dad, I think we need to talk about Hugh." Marcus looked up from his desk. "What about him?" "He missed a scheduled site inspection yesterday afternoon. Told the client he had a family emergency, but I saw Frances at the grocery store during lunch, and she seemed fine. She mentioned Hugh was at work." Marcus felt a familiar surge of anger, but kept his voice level. "What time was the missed inspection?" 2:30. The client had to reschedule, which pushed back their timeline by 2 days. "It's the third time this month Hugh's had a family emergency on Tuesday afternoons." Marcus made a note in his calendar. Hugh's pattern was becoming more obvious as Meredith's oversight increased. The project manager was struggling to maintain his professional responsibilities while keeping his personal appointment schedule. "I'll speak with Hugh about the missed inspection," Marcus told his daughter. "In the meantime, I want you to start attending client meetings as our company representative. If Hugh can't maintain his schedule reliability, we need backup coverage." Meredith nodded seriously. "I've already started building relationships with the key clients. Most of them seem pleased to have additional company attention." That afternoon, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his hotel contact. "Room 237 booked 2 to 4 p.m. today. Guest name, H. Reynolds." Marcus smiled grimly. Hugh was still keeping his appointments with Christy, but the increased pressure at work was making it harder for him to maintain the facade of professionalism. The plan was working exactly as Marcus had hoped. Hugh was being forced to choose between his professional responsibilities and his personal indulgences, and he was consistently choosing the affair over his job performance. Meanwhile, Christy was finding herself in an increasingly complicated social position. Meredith's success with Ferguson Development had elevated the family's standing in the business community, making it harder for Christy to maintain her casual dismissiveness of her daughter's achievements. At the country club that week, Christy found herself fielding congratulations about Meredith's new position. The same women who had barely acknowledged her daughter's existence were now asking for introductions and networking opportunities. Marcus watched his wife navigate these conversations with growing discomfort. Christy had built her social identity around being the successful businessman's wife, but now she was also the mother of an up-and-coming young professional. The cognitive dissonance was clearly wearing on her. But more importantly, Christy was finding it harder to create believable excuses for her afternoon absences. Her social circle was smaller and more interconnected than she'd realized. When she claimed to be with one person, there was always someone else who had seen that person elsewhere. Marcus began subtly increasing the pressure by scheduling more family obligations during Christy's usual affair hours. Business dinners that required her presence. Charity events that she couldn't refuse without seeming unsupportive. Each scheduling conflict forced Christy to choose between maintaining her social obligations and keeping her appointment with Hugh. And each choice created more stress, more lies, more opportunities for mistakes. The foundation of their deception was beginning to show cracks, and Marcus was just getting started. Chapter 5. The Trap. Marcus's next move came disguised as a generous gesture toward his employees. He announced that Boyle Construction would be sponsoring a weekend retreat for senior staff and their families at Lake Morrison, a popular resort about 2 hours from town. Team building is important, Marcus explained to the group gathered in the conference room. "We've had a successful year, and I want everyone to relax and enjoy some time together." The retreat was scheduled for the second weekend in December, giving everyone 3 weeks to arrange their schedules. Marcus made it clear that attendance was strongly encouraged but not mandatory, creating exactly the dynamic he wanted. Hugh shifted in his seat as Marcus outlined the weekend plans. "Will this conflict with any ongoing projects?" he asked. "Nothing that can't be managed," Marcus replied. "I'm sure everyone can arrange their personal schedules to accommodate a company retreat." After the meeting, Marcus watched Hugh's behavior carefully. His project manager seemed agitated, frequently checking his phone and making hushed calls from his office. Marcus's hotel contact had already confirmed that Hugh was trying to book additional rooms at the Grand View for the weekend of the retreat, apparently planning to maintain his affair schedule even during company time. The beautiful part of Marcus's plan was its apparent generosity. Who could object to a company-sponsored weekend at a luxury resort? Hugh couldn't refuse without seeming ungrateful, but accepting meant disrupting his carefully planned affair schedule. Marcus also made sure that Frances Reynolds received a personal invitation. He called her directly, emphasizing how much Christy was looking forward to spending time with the other wives. "It'll be wonderful," Marcus told Frances over the phone. "Christy's been talking about getting to know everyone better. She's especially excited about having quality time with you and Hugh." Frances seemed genuinely pleased by the invitation. "Hugh's been working so hard lately," she said. "He needs a break. Sometimes I worry that he's taking on too much stress." Marcus felt a moment of sympathy for Frances, who clearly had no idea what kind of stress her husband was actually managing. But sympathy was a luxury Marcus couldn't afford. Hugh had made his choices, and Frances was unfortunately positioned to become collateral damage. That evening, Marcus overheard Christy on the phone in their bedroom. Her voice was lower than usual, but he caught enough to understand she was speaking with Hugh about the retreat. "We can't just skip it," Christy was saying. "Marcus made it clear that everyone's expected to attend. It would look suspicious if we both had excuses." Marcus couldn't hear Hugh's response, but Christy's reply was clear. "Then we'll have to be careful. Maybe we can find time during the weekend activities." Marcus smiled to himself. Christy and Hugh thought they were being clever, planning to continue their affair even under his nose at a company retreat. They had no idea they were walking directly into the most elaborate trap Marcus had ever constructed. The next phase involved leveraging Meredith's position with Ferguson Development. Marcus asked his daughter to invite Wes Ferguson to join them for Saturday evening's dinner at the retreat. Wes and his wife would be excellent additions to the weekend, Marcus explained. "It'll strengthen our business relationship, and the other employees would enjoy meeting them." Meredith agreed enthusiastically. "That's a great idea. Wes has been very supportive of my transition, and Linda is lovely. I'll call them today." Marcus knew that having the Ferguson family at the retreat would make it impossible for Christy and Hugh to maintain their casual dismissiveness of Meredith's achievements. They would be forced to play their roles as supportive family member and loyal employee while surrounded by people who could advance or destroy their social and professional standings. Meanwhile, Marcus had been having private conversations with Kevin Wiley, the foreman who had embarrassed himself at the holiday party. Kevin was desperate to make amends for his public criticism of Meredith, and Marcus was happy to provide opportunities for redemption. "I need someone I can trust to help coordinate the retreat activities," Marcus told Kevin. "Someone who understands the importance of team unity and family support." Kevin nodded eagerly. "You can count on me, Marcus. I want to make things right after what happened at the party." "Good. I'll be assigning you to work closely with Meredith on the weekend logistics. Follow her lead and make sure everything runs smoothly." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Kevin, who had publicly called Meredith an embarrassment, would now be taking orders from her and working to ensure her success. The power dynamics at Boyle Construction were shifting dramatically, and everyone was being forced to adapt. Marcus also made sure that the retreat activities would require close collaboration between staff members and their spouses. Team-building exercises, group dinners, and scheduled social events that would make it almost impossible for Christy and Hugh to find private time together. But Marcus's most brilliant stroke was the surprise he planned for Saturday night's dinner. He'd arranged for a local photographer to document the retreat, ostensibly for the company newsletter and website. What Christy and Hugh didn't know was that the photographer would be taking pictures throughout the weekend, creating a permanent record of who was where and when. Any attempt by Christy and Hugh to sneak away together would be documented, time-stamped, and preserved for future use. 3 days before the retreat, Marcus received a call from his hotel contact with interesting news. Hugh had called to cancel his regular Tuesday reservation, claiming he would be out of town for business. But Hugh had also made several inquiries about other hotels near Lake Morrison. Marcus realized that Hugh was planning to extend his affair to the retreat location, probably hoping to book a separate room where he and Christy could meet without detection. The arrogance was breathtaking. Hugh actually thought he could continue his betrayal while attending a company event as Marcus's employee. That evening, Marcus made a call to the Lake Morrison Resort. As the person booking the corporate retreat, he had certain privileges regarding room assignments and guest policies. I need to make sure all of my employees are accounted for throughout the weekend, Marcus explained to the resort manager. For insurance purposes, I'll need a record of all guests and rooms paid for by my company, and I'll need to be notified of any additional bookings made by my employees. The manager was happy to accommodate such a large group booking. Marcus would know immediately if Hugh tried to book an additional room at the resort. By Friday evening, everything was in place. The transportation was arranged, the activities were planned, and the stage was set for Christy and Hugh to destroy themselves publicly and professionally. Marcus packed his weekend bag with the satisfaction of a general preparing for a battle he'd already won. Christy and Hugh thought they were attending a pleasant company retreat. They had no idea they were walking into the most sophisticated trap Marcus had ever constructed. The weekend at Lake Morrison would end their affair permanently, but not in the way they expected. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. The weekend retreat began exactly as Marcus had planned. 2 chartered buses transported the Boyle construction families to Lake Morrison Resort on Friday afternoon, with everyone settling into their rooms and gathering for dinner by evening. The atmosphere was festive and relaxed, precisely the opposite of what Marcus felt as he watched Christy and Hugh maintain their careful distance while their eyes searched for opportunities. Marcus had arranged the room assignment strategically. Christy shared a room with him, naturally, while Hugh was roomed with Francis. But more importantly, Marcus had positioned Meredith and Kevin Wiley in the room directly between the Boyle and Reynolds families. Any midnight wandering would require passing directly by people who would notice. Saturday's activities kept everyone busy from morning until late evening. Team-building exercises, a group hike around the lake, and coordinated games that required family participation. Marcus watched with grim satisfaction as Christy and Hugh grew increasingly frustrated by their inability to find private time together. Frances Reynolds seemed to be enjoying herself immensely, commenting several times about how nice it was to have Hugh's undivided attention for once. He's been so distracted lately, she told Christy during the afternoon activities, always checking his phone and making mysterious calls. I'm glad he's finally relaxing. Christy's smile in response looked painful. The Saturday evening dinner was Marcus's masterpiece. Wes and Linda Ferguson arrived as planned, bringing an air of importance to the gathering that elevated everyone's behavior. The photographer Marcus had hired worked discreetly throughout the evening, capturing candid moments of the various families interacting. Marcus had arranged for himself to be seated between Wes Ferguson and Hugh Reynolds, ensuring that Hugh couldn't escape or avoid participating in the conversation. Christy found herself positioned with Linda Ferguson and Frances Reynolds, forced to maintain pleasant conversation with both her lover's wife and her husband's most important client. Your daughter is remarkable, Linda Ferguson told Christy during dinner. Wes says she has excellent instincts for business development. Thank you, Christy replied, her voice tight. We're very proud of her. I'm sure you are. It must be wonderful to see her succeeding in such a competitive field. Hugh tells us she's been very effective in her oversight role. Marcus watched Christy's reaction to Linda's innocent comment. The reminder that Meredith now had professional authority over Hugh was clearly painful for Christy to contemplate. Hugh, meanwhile, was struggling with his own conversation. Wes Ferguson was asking detailed questions about project management and cost control, exactly the areas where Hugh's performance had been questionable since his affair began. Marcus tells me you've been having some scheduling challenges, Wes mentioned casually. How do you balance multiple project deadlines with unexpected complications? Hugh's response was unconvincing, filled with vague references to industry challenges and client demands. Marcus could see Wes growing less impressed with each inadequate answer. After dinner, Marcus made his announcement. I have a surprise for everyone, he said, standing and raising his wine glass. Next month, Boyle Construction will be bidding on the largest project in our company's history. Ferguson Development has invited us to submit a proposal for their new residential complex, a $50 million project that would require a 3-year commitment. The room erupted in excited conversation. A project of that magnitude would transform Boyle Construction from a regional company into a major player in the industry. The project will require our absolute best work, Marcus continued. I'll be personally overseeing every aspect, working directly with our liaison Meredith and our project management team to ensure perfect execution. Hugh's face had gone pale. A project of that scope would require constant oversight, detailed reporting, and absolutely reliable scheduling. There would be no room for the kind of unprofessional behavior he'd been exhibiting. Marcus let the congratulations and excited chatter continue for several minutes before delivering his final surprise. The photographer tonight has been documenting our celebration because this weekend represents a turning point for our company. These pictures will be featured in our proposal to Ferguson Development, showing the strong family atmosphere and team unity that makes Boyle Construction special. Christie's wine glass trembled in her hand. He looked like he might be sick. The idea that their behavior throughout the weekend had been photographed and would be presented to clients was clearly terrifying to both of them. But Marcus wasn't finished. In fact, I'd like everyone to gather for a group photo right now. This moment deserves to be preserved. As everyone assembled for the photograph, Marcus positioned himself between Christie and Hugh, with their respective spouses on the outside. Meredith stood proudly next to Wes Ferguson, representing the new generation of the family business. The photographer took multiple shots, ensuring that everyone's face was clearly visible and properly documented. Marcus made sure that both Christie and Hugh were looking directly at the camera, their discomfort barely concealed behind forced smiles. After the photo session, people began drifting toward their rooms. Marcus caught Hugh's eye and gestured toward the resort bar. How about nightcap? We should discuss the staffing requirements for the Ferguson project. Hugh couldn't refuse without seeming unprofessional, especially with Wes Ferguson still in the building. He followed Marcus to the bar, leaving Christie to walk back to the rooms with Frances and the other wives. Marcus ordered 2 whiskeys and got straight to the point. I need to know I can count on you for this project, Hugh. $50 million doesn't allow for scheduling conflicts or family emergencies. Hugh took a large gulp of his whiskey. Of course you can count on me. I'm completely committed to the company's success. Good, because there have been some concerns about your reliability lately. Missing client meetings, scheduling conflicts, distracted behavior. I need to know that's behind us. Hugh's jaw tightened. What exactly are you implying? Marcus smiled coldly. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating directly that your performance has declined, and I need to understand why. The 2 men stared at each other across the small table. Hugh was calculating how much Marcus might know, while Marcus was enjoying watching his employee squirm under pressure. Personal issues can affect professional performance, Marcus continued. If you're dealing with something that's impacting your work, now would be the time to address it honestly. Hugh finished his whiskey in one gulp. There are no personal issues affecting my work. Excellent. Then I can expect perfect reliability moving forward. No missed meetings, no mysterious appointments, no unexplained absences. Hugh nodded stiffly. Absolutely. Marcus raised his glass in a mock toast. To the Ferguson project, and to the absolute trust and loyalty that makes success possible. Hugh clinked his glass against Marcus's, but his hand was shaking slightly. As they walked back toward the rooms, Marcus delivered his final message. By the way, Hugh, I've decided that all senior staff will be required to provide detailed daily schedules for the duration of the Ferguson project. Client oversight demands complete transparency about where our team members are and what they're working on. Hugh stopped walking. Daily schedules? Hourly, actually. Ferguson Development needs to know that their $50 million investment is being managed with absolute precision. Marcus continued walking toward his room, leaving Hugh standing in the hallway. Through the window, Marcus could see Christie pacing in their room, clearly waiting for news about what had transpired during the bar conversation. As Marcus prepared for bed, he reflected on the weekend success. Christie and Hugh were now trapped between their desire to continue their affair and the crushing pressure of professional scrutiny. The Ferguson project made it impossible for Hugh to maintain his irresponsible behavior, while the photography and documentation made it dangerous for either of them to risk exposure. But most importantly, Marcus had established a new dynamic where he controlled every aspect of their professional and social environments. Christy and Hugh were no longer playing a private game. They were performing under constant observation, with their reputations and livelihoods hanging in the balance. The trap was set and ready to spring. All that remained was waiting for Christy and Hugh to make the inevitable mistake that would destroy them completely. Chapter 7. The Pressure. The weeks following the retreat brought exactly the pressure Marcus had anticipated. Hugh's new daily reporting requirements made his affairs schedule nearly impossible to maintain, while Christy found herself under increased social scrutiny as the mother of Ferguson Development's rising star. Marcus watched with satisfaction as both his wife and employees struggled to adapt to their new reality. Hugh's hourly schedules were submitted each morning and cross-referenced against actual activities throughout the day. Any discrepancy required explanation and documentation. Your 2 p.m. site inspection was rescheduled, Meredith mentioned to Hugh during a Monday morning meeting. The client said you called with a family emergency. Is everything all right with Francis and the kids? Hugh's face flushed. Just a minor issue. Everything's resolved now. I'm glad to hear that, Marcus interjected. But we'll need to implement a backup system for emergencies. Client relationships are too important to risk disruption. Meredith nodded approvingly. I could serve as backup for any emergency situations. It would ensure continuity of service. Hugh looked trapped. Having Meredith as backup meant that any future emergencies would require her involvement, making his lives much harder to maintain. Meanwhile, Christy was discovering that her elevated social position came with uncomfortable obligations. Linda Ferguson had invited her to join the board of the Children's Education Foundation, a legitimate charity that required actual time commitment and public involvement. It's such an honor, Linda explained over lunch at the country club. With Meredith's success and your family's growing influence in the business community, your voice would be valuable in our fundraising efforts. Christy accepted the position because refusing would have seemed ungrateful, but the irony was painful. She was now committed to supporting children's education, while her affair was conducted during hours she claimed to be doing charity work. Marcus began receiving reports from his hotel contact that painted a clear picture of growing desperation. He had tried to book rooms at 3 different hotels, always for Tuesday and Thursday afternoon blocks. But each attempt was canceled within hours, usually after frantic phone calls from Christy about scheduling conflicts. The strain was beginning to show in both their public and private behavior. Christy had become short-tempered at home, snapping at Marcus over minor issues and spending more time locked in the bathroom, making hushed phone calls. Hugh was making mistakes at work, missing details, and submitting reports with obvious errors. I'm concerned about Hugh's performance, Meredith mentioned to Marcus during one of their private meetings. His project oversight has become sloppy, and he seems distracted during client presentations. Marcus leaned back in his chair. What do you recommend? Additional oversight at minimum. Maybe we should consider bringing in an assistant project manager to help with the workload. Interesting suggestion. Do you have someone in mind? Meredith smiled. Actually, Kevin Wiley has been asking about advancement opportunities. His work at the retreat was excellent, and he's been very supportive of the new quality control measures. Marcus nodded approvingly. Kevin's transformation from Meredith's critic to her advocate had been remarkable to watch. The foreman was so eager to make amends for his holiday party behavior that he'd become one of Meredith's most loyal supporters. Set up a meeting with Kevin, Marcus told his daughter. If he's interested in project management training, we'll consider adding him to the team. The next day, Marcus called Hugh into his office for a performance review meeting. The timing was deliberate, Tuesday afternoon, exactly when Hugh would normally be meeting Christy at whatever hotel they'd managed to book. I've been reviewing your recent work, Marcus began, spreading project files across his desk. There are some patterns that concern me. Hugh shifted uncomfortably in his chair. What kind of patterns? Inconsistent attention to detail. Scheduling irregularities. Client complaints about communication gaps. Marcus looked up from the files. Help me understand what's causing these issues. Hugh's eyes darted toward the clock on Marcus's wall. It was 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes before his usual meeting time with Christy. I think you might be seeing problems that don't exist, Hugh said defensively. My project completion rate is still above company average. Completion rate isn't the only metric that matters, Marcus replied. Client satisfaction, cost control, team coordination, all of these have shown decline over the past several months. Hugh's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it quickly, and Marcus caught the flash of panic in his eyes. Is that urgent? Marcus asked innocently. No, just routine business. Good, because this conversation is important. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. Hugh, I need to know if there's something affecting your ability to maintain professional standards. Health issues, family problems, personal stress, anything that might explain the performance decline. Hugh's phone buzzed again. This time he ignored it, but Marcus could see the effort it required. There's nothing affecting my work performance, Hugh said firmly. I hope that's true, Marcus replied. Because the Ferguson project requires absolute reliability. $50 million doesn't allow for distracted employees or inconsistent performance. The meeting continued for another hour, with Marcus asking detailed questions about specific projects and timelines. Hugh's answers became increasingly strained as his phone continued to buzz with what Marcus assumed were increasingly frantic messages from Christy. When the meeting finally ended, Hugh rushed from the office without his usual pleasantries. Marcus watched through his window as Hugh hurried to his car, phone pressed to his ear. That evening, Christy was unusually quiet during dinner. She picked at her food and responded to Marcus's conversation with distracted one-word answers. Everything all right? Marcus asked. You seem troubled about something. Christy looked up sharply. I'm fine, just tired from a charity work. How's the Children's Education Foundation Board? Linda Ferguson speaks very highly of your commitment. It's fine. Busy. Lots of meetings and planning sessions. Marcus nodded sympathetically. I imagine it's challenging to balance charity work with your other social obligations. When's your next board meeting? Christy's pause was almost imperceptible. Thursday afternoon. We're planning a fundraiser for next month. Marcus made a mental note. Thursday afternoon was one of Hugh's traditional affair slots. Either Christy was lying about the board meeting, or she and Hugh had been forced to find yet another time to meet. The next morning, Marcus called Linda Ferguson directly. I wanted to thank you for including Christy on the foundation board, he said. She's been very excited about the work. Actually, Linda replied, we haven't had a board meeting since last month. Christy mentioned she needed to miss Thursday's meeting for a family obligation. We rescheduled for next week. Marcus felt the familiar surge of anger at Christy's casual lies, but his voice remained pleasant. I must have misunderstood her schedule. Thank you for being flexible with her availability. After ending the call, Marcus sat back in his chair and considered his next move. Christy and Hugh were becoming increasingly desperate, making more mistakes and taking greater risks to maintain their affair. The pressure was working exactly as intended. But Marcus wanted more than just inconvenience and stress. He wanted complete destruction of their comfortable deception, and he was beginning to see exactly how to achieve it. The final trap would require perfect timing and absolute precision. But when it sprung, Christy and Hugh would lose everything they valued: their reputations, their relationships, and their ability to ever feel secure again. Marcus opened his laptop and began making detailed plans for the endgame. Chapter 8. The Unraveling. Marcus's final strategy required patience and the kind of meticulous planning that had made his construction business successful. He would create a situation where Christy and Hugh's desperation would force them into a public mistake they couldn't explain away. The opportunity came when Ferguson Development announced an unexpected change to their timeline. Wes Ferguson called Marcus directly with the news. We're moving up the residential complex project by 3 months, Wes explained. Market conditions are favorable, and we want to break ground in early spring. Can Boyle Construction handle an accelerated schedule? Marcus didn't hesitate. Absolutely. We'll make whatever adjustments are necessary to meet your timeline. This acceleration meant that Hugh's performance issues could no longer be overlooked or managed quietly. The project would require flawless execution, with no room for the kinds of mistakes and distractions that had been plaguing Hugh's work. Marcus called an emergency meeting for Thursday afternoon, prime affair time for Christy and Hugh. All senior staff were required to attend, with no exceptions allowed for personal obligations. Ferguson Development has advanced our timeline significantly, Marcus announced to the assembled team. This is the opportunity of a lifetime for our company, but it requires absolute commitment from everyone. Hugh sat rigidly in his chair, his phone buzzing constantly with what Marcus assumed were increasingly frantic messages from Christy. The project manager's face showed the strain of choosing between professional obligations and personal desires. Effective immediately, we're implementing a new management structure, Marcus continued. Kevin Wiley will be promoted to assistant project manager, working directly with Hugh to ensure seamless execution of all project elements. Kevin beamed with pride, while Hugh's expression grew more strained. Having Kevin as his assistant meant that Hugh's activities would be under constant scrutiny by someone eager to prove himself worthy of the promotion. Additionally, Marcus said, all project managers will be required to maintain shared digital calendars, accessible to the entire management team. Transparency and coordination are essential for a project of this magnitude. Hugh's phone buzzed again. This time he silenced it completely, but Marcus could see the panic in his eyes. Shared calendars meant that every meeting, every appointment, every absence would be visible to the entire team. Meredith spoke up from her seat at the conference table. I'll be implementing weekly progress reviews with Ferguson Development. They want detailed reports on resource allocation and timeline adherence. Excellent, Marcus said. Hugh, you'll coordinate directly with Meredith to ensure our reporting meets Ferguson standards. After the meeting, Marcus watched Hugh hurry from the building, phone pressed to his ear. The project manager was clearly trying to salvage whatever arrangement he'd made with Christy for that afternoon. But Marcus's real masterstroke was still to come. That evening, Marcus made two important phone calls. The first was to Francis Reynolds. Francis, I wanted to let you know that Hugh will be working much longer hours over the next few months, Marcus explained. The Ferguson project requires extensive overtime, and I wanted to make sure you were prepared for his increased schedule. Francis seemed grateful for the consideration. Thank you for calling, Marcus. Hugh's been so stressed lately, working late almost every day. I was beginning to worry that something was wrong. Construction deadlines can be challenging, Marcus replied sympathetically. But this project will establish Hugh's reputation in the industry. The long hours will be worth it. The second call was to Christy's sister Janet. I'm planning a surprise for Christy, Marcus told Janet. She's been working so hard with her charity obligations that I want to do something special for her. Could you help me coordinate a surprise lunch next week? Janet was enthusiastic about the idea. That's so thoughtful. Christy's been mentioning how busy she's been with the Children's Education Foundation. She deserves some recognition for all her volunteer work. Marcus suggested Thursday afternoon for the surprise lunch, knowing it would conflict with any affair plans Christy might be making. I'll tell her it's a business lunch with Ferguson Development spouses. She'll feel obligated to attend. Perfect. I'll make reservations somewhere nice and invite a few of her other friends. She'll be so surprised. Marcus smiled as he ended the call. Christy would indeed be surprised, but not in the way Janet imagined. The next week unfolded exactly as Marcus had planned. Hugh's shared calendar showed a suspicious gap on Thursday afternoon marked only as site inspection, while Christy had already begun making excuses about her busy charity schedule. I might be late for dinner Thursday, Christy mentioned casually on Wednesday evening. The foundation board has an emergency meeting about the fundraiser. Marcus nodded sympathetically. Actually, that works out perfectly. Linda Ferguson invited you to a special lunch with the development spouses. It's at 1 p.m. at the Riverside restaurant. She specifically asked me to make sure you attended. Christy's face went white. I'm not sure I can make it. The board meeting. Linda will be disappointed if you skip her lunch for another obligation, Marcus said firmly. Your relationship with the Ferguson family is important for Meredith's career. Christy was trapped. She couldn't refuse Linda Ferguson's invitation without seeming ungrateful, but accepting meant missing her Thursday afternoon appointment with Hugh. Thursday morning arrived with unseasonably warm weather, perfect for Marcus's final surprise. He'd arranged for Kevin Wiley to accompany Hugh on his afternoon site inspection, claiming that the new assistant project manager needed hands-on experience with client relations. "I appreciate the opportunity," Kevin told Hugh enthusiastically. "I want to learn everything about your project management techniques." Hugh looked physically ill. "Actually, today's inspection is fairly routine. Maybe we should start your training with something more complex." "Nonsense," Marcus interjected. "Kevin needs to see how you handle all aspects of the job. Take him along to everything." At exactly 1 p.m., Christy arrived at the Riverside restaurant to find Janet and 3 other friends waiting with balloons and a small cake. The surprise lunch was real, complete with photographers Janet had hired to document Christy's reaction. "Surprise!" Janet called out as Christy entered the restaurant. "Marcus wanted to celebrate all your charity work." Christy's smile looked painted on as she accepted congratulations and posed for pictures that would be shared across social media within hours. Meanwhile, Hugh was frantically trying to escape Kevin's enthusiastic companionship. "I need to check on another site quickly," Hugh told Kevin around 2 p.m. "Why don't you head back to the office?" Kevin shook his head. "Marcus said to stick with you all afternoon. I don't want to disappoint him on my first week as assistant manager." Hugh's phone had been buzzing constantly throughout the day. Christy's messages were becoming increasingly desperate as she realized she was trapped at the surprise lunch with no way to meet Hugh privately. By 3 p.m., both Christy and Hugh were in full panic mode. Christy was still smiling for photographs at the restaurant while texting frantically under the table. Hugh was making excuses to check his phone every few minutes, claiming to be coordinating with subcontractors. "Is everything all right?" Kevin asked Hugh. "You seem distracted." "Just normal project stress," Hugh replied, but his hand was shaking as he scrolled through Christy's messages. At 4 p.m., Christy finally escaped the lunch by claiming a family emergency. She drove directly to the Grandview Hotel, hoping to salvage what remained of her affair appointment. But Hugh was still trapped with Kevin, who was enthusiastically documenting every aspect of their afternoon activities. Christy sat in the hotel parking lot for 30 minutes, calling Hugh repeatedly. His phone went straight to voicemail each time. Kevin's presence made it impossible for Hugh to answer personal calls. Finally, Christy drove home in frustrated defeat. For the first time in 8 months, she and Hugh had been completely prevented from meeting. The carefully constructed lies and elaborate scheduling that had protected their affair had finally collapsed under the weight of Marcus's pressure. That evening, Marcus watched Christy struggle to maintain her composure during dinner. She was clearly agitated, jumping every time her phone buzzed and barely touching her food. "How was the surprise lunch?" Marcus asked innocently. "Janet said you seemed overwhelmed by everyone's appreciation for your charity work." "It was lovely," Christy replied through gritted teeth. "Very thoughtful of you to arrange it. I have the pictures Janet sent," Marcus said, pulling out his phone. "You look beautiful in every one. The local newspaper wants to run a story about your foundation work using these photos." Christy's fork clattered against her plate. Public recognition of her charity work would make it even harder to create believable excuses for her afternoon absences. Marcus smiled as he showed Christy the photographs. In every image, she looked trapped and miserable despite her forced smile. The pictures perfectly captured the moment when Christy realized that her comfortable deception was finally crumbling. The endgame was approaching, and Marcus held all the cards. Chapter 9: The Reckoning. Marcus waited exactly 1 week before springing his final trap. He scheduled a mandatory company meeting for Thursday afternoon, requiring all senior staff and their spouses to attend a special announcement regarding the Ferguson project. The meeting was held in the main conference room at Boyle Construction, with coffee and pastries arranged to suggest a celebration. Marcus had invited Wes and Linda Ferguson as special guests, giving the gathering an air of importance that made attendance absolutely mandatory. Christy arrived looking haggard and nervous. She'd been struggling all week to reschedule her affair meetings with Hugh, but Marcus's increased oversight and Kevin's constant presence had made private time impossible. The strain was showing in her appearance and demeanor. Hugh entered the conference room looking equally desperate. His shared calendar showed increasingly erratic scheduling as he tried to find windows of opportunity that no longer existed. Kevin Wiley followed him closely, maintaining the enthusiastic oversight that had become his trademark since the promotion. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, standing at the head of the conference table. "I have several important announcements that will affect everyone here." Marcus gestured toward a display board he'd set up near the windows. "First, I'm pleased to announce that Ferguson Development has formally selected Boyle Construction as the primary contractor for their residential complex." The contract was signed this morning. The room erupted in applause and congratulations. This was genuinely exciting news that would transform the company's future. But Marcus wasn't finished. "Second, I want to recognize the exceptional work of our assistant project coordinator." Marcus smiled at Meredith, who was seated between Wes and Linda Ferguson. Meredith's oversight and quality control measures have been instrumental in securing this contract. More applause followed, with several employees expressing their appreciation for Meredith's contribution. Hugh clapped mechanically, his face showing the strain of maintaining professional composure. Finally, Marcus said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "I need to address some performance issues that have come to my attention." The room fell silent. This was unexpected, and everyone could sense the shift in atmosphere. Marcus walked to his laptop and connected it to the room's display screen. "Over the past several months, I've been documenting irregularities in our project management systems. Missed appointments, unauthorized schedule changes, and pattern discrepancies that affect our client relationships." Hugh's face had gone completely white. He knew what was coming, but was powerless to stop it. These issues appear to be centered around one individual whose personal priorities have begun affecting professional performance. Marcus clicked to display Hugh's calendar on the screen. "Let me show you what I've discovered." The calendar revealed everything. Weeks of family emergencies that coincided with missed client meetings. Site inspections that never appeared in the actual project logs. Scheduling gaps that aligned perfectly with Christie's charity meetings. "Hugh," Marcus said quietly, "would you like to explain these discrepancies?" Hugh stood frozen, unable to speak. Frances looked confused, staring at the calendar display and trying to understand what she was seeing. Christie started to rise from her chair, but Marcus gestured for her to remain seated. "We're not finished yet." Marcus clicked to the next screen, displaying hotel records he'd obtained through his contact. These are documentation records from the Grandview Hotel, showing regular bookings by Hugh Reynolds, always during scheduled work hours. Frances gasped audibly. The room was completely silent, except for the sound of her sharp intake of breath. "Mrs. Reynolds," Marcus said gently, "I'm sorry you had to learn about this in such a public setting, but the impact on our business operations made a public discussion necessary." Frances looked at Hugh with dawning horror. "You've been at a hotel during work hours?" Hugh tried to speak, but no words came out. His career, his marriage, and his reputation were disintegrating simultaneously in front of everyone he worked with. But Marcus had saved the most devastating revelation for last. "There's one more piece of information that explains these scheduling patterns," Marcus said, clicking to the final screen. The display showed a detailed timeline matching Hugh's hotel visits with Christie's claimed charity activities. Every date, every time, every lie was laid out in perfect parallel columns. "My wife has been Hugh's companion during these hotel visits," Marcus announced calmly. "They've been conducting an affair for 8 months, using company time and family resources to maintain their deception." The silence that followed was deafening. Christie sat frozen in her chair, her face a mask of horror and humiliation. Hugh had collapsed back into his seat, his head in his hands. Frances Reynolds began crying quietly. Linda Ferguson reached over to comfort her, while Wes stared at Hugh with undisguised disgust. "Christie," Marcus said, turning toward his wife, "do you have anything to say in your defense?" Christie's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words emerged. She looked around the room at the faces staring back at her, colleagues, friends, business associates, all witnessing her complete humiliation. "I thought not," Marcus said. He walked back to the head of the table and addressed the room. Effective immediately, Hugh Reynolds is terminated from Boyle Construction. All projects under his management will be transferred to Kevin Wiley and Meredith Boyle. Hugh finally found his voice. "Marcus, please. I know I made mistakes, but—" "Mistakes?" Marcus interrupted. "You betrayed my trust, damaged my family, and compromised our business relationships. There are no second chances for that level of betrayal." Marcus turned toward Christie. "As for my wife, our marriage is over. Christie will be moving out of our family home immediately. Our attorneys will handle the divorce proceedings." Christie finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Marcus, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," Marcus replied coldly. "You made your choices. Now you'll live with the consequences." Wes Ferguson stood up slowly. "Marcus, I want you to know that Ferguson Development's confidence in Boyle Construction remains unchanged. Your handling of this situation demonstrates exactly the kind of integrity and leadership we value in our business partners." Marcus nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Wes. I promise you that our personal difficulties will not affect our professional commitment to your projects." Linda Ferguson helped Frances Reynolds to her feet. "Come on, honey. Let's get you home." As people began filing out of the conference room, Marcus remained standing at the head of the table. Hugh and Christie sat in their chairs like broken dolls, unable to move or speak. Kevin Wiley approached Marcus with obvious concern. "Sir, what do you need me to do about the project transitions?" "Handle everything exactly as you've been trained," Marcus replied. "You've earned this promotion through your excellent work. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Kevin nodded firmly and left the room. Within minutes, only Marcus, Christie, and Hugh remained. "You planned this," Christie whispered. "You knew all along." Marcus looked at his wife with complete coldness. "I knew from the first week. Everything that happened afterward was your choice. You could have stopped at any time, but you chose to continue lying and deceiving." Hugh finally raised his head. "What about my family? Frances and the kids don't deserve." "You should have considered your family before you decided to betray them," Marcus interrupted. "Your children will grow up knowing that their father chose selfishness over integrity." Marcus walked toward the door, then turned back for his final words. "You both made the mistake of thinking I was too trusting or too busy to notice what you were doing. You forgot that I built this company by paying attention to details and never accepting anything less than complete reliability." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You wanted to play games with my life and my family. I played games with yours. The difference is that I won." Marcus left the conference room and walked to his office, where Meredith was waiting with a concerned expression. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked. Marcus looked at his daughter, bright, honest, hard-working, everything he'd hoped she would become. "I'm better than okay," he said. "I'm free." 3 months later, Boyle Construction broke ground on the Ferguson Development residential complex. The project was completed ahead of schedule and under budget, earning the company recognition as the region's premier construction firm. Christie moved to another state, finding work as a receptionist at a small medical practice. The divorce settlement left her with enough money to survive, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. Hugh Reynolds never found another job in construction. Word of his betrayal spread quickly through the industry's tight-knit community. He eventually took work as a warehouse supervisor, earning a fraction of his former salary. Frances Reynolds kept the house and custody of the children. She never remarried, but found happiness in a simpler life away from the social pressures that had contributed to her husband's infidelity. Marcus never remarried either. He focused on building his business empire and watching Meredith develop into a formidable force in the development industry. Father and daughter became the most respected construction team in 3 states, known for their integrity, reliability, and absolute refusal to tolerate betrayal. Marcus had learned that some betrayals could never be forgiven, only punished. And sometimes the punishment was swift and perfect justice. And there you have it, another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.